Okay, so what we're going to do today, and I'll give a little intro about this, is we're going to be talking about the geodatabase in ArcGIS. Now, the geodatabase, everything that we're going to do with the geodatabase, we're going to do it in ArcGIS Pro, but the geodatabase is understand, it's a canister. It is a database, a container for your GIS data, and this exact same geodatabase can be used in ArcMap, ArcCatalog, ArcGIS Pro. So anything that we're doing today, you could actually emulate and do those same things in ArcMap or ArcCatalog. I think it's easier to do some of these things in ArcGIS Pro. There's some things that we might do that can only be done in Pro, but for the most part, everything will be able to be done in either of those or any of those ArcGIS desktop software applications. So let me set this up now. What we're looking at here is, and many of you can probably recognize this, this is the Yellowstone National Park area. And I suppose many people here in this region from Idaho and that the region right around here have visited Yellowstone National Park, one of my favorite places in the whole wide world. And I like to use Yellowstone National Park data in my exercises that when I'm teaching classes and in my workshops. So I'm going to turn on a layer here that we're going to be working with today. This is Yellowstone National Park hiking trails, various different trails in the Yellowstone National Park area. And let me open up its attribute table. Let's take a look at the data that we actually have available to us. Here we have, of course, the very normal common object ID. This is something that ArcGIS takes care of. We don't deal with it. We can't change it, actually. The shape field. But then we get into a bunch of user generated or user controlled attributes. We have name, survey date, surveyor, survey or survey type, surface of that trail, and the allowed usage on that trail. And then finally, the GPS date. That would appear, obviously, it seems like, if the trail had been GPS surveyed. In other words, someone collected it with a GPS. The last field on the end here is shape length. This is another one of those Esri generated or geodatabase controlled fields. Now, the fields that I'm really interested in are these candidate fields, fields that are candidates to be converted from what you're seeing here. We see that this is a text field. Whoops, I was hoping it would keep showing this. This is a text field that is 254 characters wide. It's a very wide field. We see a second field here called survey, survey type. It's also text with 12 characters wide. Surface, text 50 characters wide, and usage, text of 50 characters wide. So whenever I see fields like these that are text fields, I start looking at them more closely to determine if they really are candidates to be converted to a attribute domain. So if this is a text field, we could type in any alphanumeric keys that we want to put into this thing. But something like surveyor, I kind of wonder, not everyone in the whole wide world would be a surveyor at Yellowstone National Park. The type of survey is probably a fairly short list. The type of surfaces is probably a fairly short list. And I think you're getting the hint here that whenever we have a discrete, manageable set of options or entries, that there really is no reason for us to be typing these entries in over and over and over again. Rather, it might be far more intelligent to apply and effective in your workflow to apply a coded value attribute domain. Now, there's numerous different types of domains that we can utilize in the geodatabase. There are some of the more, if you want to call it, topological domains, like a Z domain that deals with elevation, very important for 3D layering, those sorts of things. There's an M domain, measures domain, very important for dynamic segmentation. And then there are these two attribute domains. The first is a range attribute domain that we're not going to really talk about too much today. The second is a coded value attribute domain. Now, the way that works, and that's what we're going to really be talking about today, the way that it works is the user sees words, even a sentence in many cases, or some cases, but internally, inside of the geodatabase, we're storing numbers. And the advantage of that is that we are shrinking the size of that geodatabase, and specifically its attribute table, sometimes very significantly. Just as an FYI for you, a text or character string-based field is effectively a data hog. It consumes far more space in your database than would a short integer data type, long integer data type, even double floating point data types. So if we have something that we could convert from a text data type into a short integer data type, we can significantly reduce the size of that attribute table. And internally, if all that we were doing was working on my own workstation right here on my own desk, you really wouldn't see much benefit by doing that. It probably wouldn't make the machine run even a second or two faster, or minute faster, or anything like that. However, there's so much of what we do today that where we provide our GIS data to someone else who knows where they are using the internet, and we provide that data as a web map. Now, in this case, shrinking that database to be as small as possible is definitely going to buy you performance gains, and those will be tangible performance gains. People will be able to get that data much faster than they would if you had more of a kind of a big attribute table. So I said that these are candidates for being converted to a coded value attribute domain. And I'm going to investigate this just a little bit more closely to see if they truly are candidates for this. So I'm going to look at this survey. This is what I call the survey type. And the best way to figure out how large of a set of discrete values are being stored in this field, the best way to do that, here's a nice little trick, is to use the summarize tool. So all that I've done there is I've right-clicked on the field of interest. This becomes the case field, okay? And now I'm going to go back to the top of my geoprocessing task pane, and I'm going to give this a nice name. I'm going to call this, let's go into this database for me here, and I'm going to call this the survey type list. Click Save. And as long as I'm generating a summary, let me go ahead and get a little bit more information. I'm going to take the shape length, and I'm going to get the sum of the shape length. So the total number of meters, in this case, that's surveyed by this survey type. Might just be interesting to take a look at that. I click Run, and in a matter of seconds, that list has been completed for me. Now, what I'm really most interested in for this coded value attribute domain work is how big of a list do we have here? Not too bad. I essentially have 10 different discrete entries, and those are very manageable, especially in a 15-minute webinar. Now, I want to point out something else here, that one of the great benefits of using coded value attribute domains is that you will eliminate typos. Note here, I'm going to do this. Whoops, wrong way. Look at this. We have a thing called digitized, spelled correctly, and we have another digitized, spelled incorrectly. Now this I know is wrong. I don't know if this digitized 7 period is really another sort of typo or anything like that. But definitely we've got some typos in here, and that could affect just your use of the geodatabase. No doubt about that. And so there's no reason for this to be in here. I'm going to go ahead and reduce this size here a little bit more back to normal. So I like this. We're definitely going to convert this into a coded value attribute domain. I've done a similar thing with the surface field. This is also very manageable. Notice we have typos again. Okay. The list of surveyors. Is this a manageable list? Let's take a look. Oops. Yeah, not too bad. A little bit larger list. Yeah, I think 31 entries or 30 actual entries as well as an unknown could go in there. We might also discover that there are some typos in here. We'd have to look at that a little bit more closely. And the usage list, this one's a little bit larger, not so sure we would do that conversion, but we might. Okay, and we might actually be able to recategorize these a little bit more intelligently. Okay, so the one that we're going to work with today, I'd say that all four of those are actually good candidates to be converted into a coded value attribute domain. So first thing I'm going to do is create a coded value attribute domain. To do that, I'm going to come over here. I'm going to right click on the layer, or I could come over here and right click on the geodatabase. Either way, we're going to get to this exact same thing. I'm going to go into design mode and start designing a domain. Click on this new domain. I'm going to give it the name survey type. We should give a nice little description over here, because understand that you're not the only user of this data. So something like this would be fine. I like to use my tab keys to move from entry to entry. The field type now this is not asking what it's actually going to show in the description. This is what's being stored internally to the geodatabase. And because I have less than 32,000 unique entries, a short integer will work just fine. So short integer is my choice there. And now I'm going to come over here to this little table. And I'm going to start making some entries. A value of 0, I'm going to say is unknown. I like to always have an unknown or an other. Works out really well. And some of the other entries that we're going to put in here will be, whoops, 1 for digitized, 2, and I guess we're going to leave in digitized 7. I would actually go back, whoops, to the client, the customer. In this case, I'd go back to Yellowstone National Park, and I'd ask them to review this discrete list because maybe this digitized 7 is actually an error, so we could simply eliminate it. Another nice thing about the coded value attribute domains is I can add to it very, very easily later on. I can modify. If I actually made a typo here somewhere, I can make that change. So simple, and it'll be instantly reflected everywhere else in wherever it's used in the table. DRG office is 5, or the 4th entry. We have a GPS. I'm just going to put in exactly what they have here. GPS uncorrected. Why not put the whole word in there? Always think about your end users, trying to make the data that they're going to see, that they're going to use, try to make that as user-friendly as possible and as meaningful as possible. 8 is office. And the last one now, number 9, is redo this. Okay, that's good. Now I like to click up here somewhere so Arc doesn't think I have another entry. Notice I have green. That means everything is good. It checks out. Last thing I need to do now is to save this. I have made my changes. Okay, so it accepted all those changes. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bail out of the domain designer, come back over here to my Yellowstone National Parks Trails attribute table, and I'm going to add a new field. And I'm going to call this, it'll be something very similar, right? Because we are going to be replacing survey with survey type. And I like to apply aliases. I think that they're great, again, for making our data more user-friendly. Now we have to pay attention to this. Now the data type for this field, which is going to be where we're going to apply our coded value attribute domain that we just created, the data type has to be identical. And we recall that we used a short integer there. So this has to be a short integer. Now when I come over, tab, 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 one more time, we note that survey type is shown as an option. And that's simply because they match data types. I'm going to click away from this, click Save. We now have a new field created. But of course, there's no data here. If we have, well, we have 1,692 entries. I don't want to do that by hand, but if we only had a couple entries, I could come over here, click on it, do the drop down, and we see, okay, GPS needs to be GPS. We got to make sure this matches up, okay? See how I did that? This is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, value 5, okay? Well, I don't want to do this 1,000 times, so I'm going to work a little smarter. So what I'm going to do is I want to select all of the entries where survey is equal to GPS. I'm going to do that with the Select by Attributes SQL tool. Save the edit that I just made there. Okay, new expression. Real quick here. Survey is equal to GPS. Run it. We have 1,635, so I can get rid of or get done with an awful lot of these all at one time. Type of survey. Now calculate this field. And the survey type is a 5. I just noted that. Let's see if I did it right. Click run. There we go. Survey type has been changed to GPS, and I would then continue this process. I would get all of the digitized, GPS uncorrected, GPS office. I'd get all that done. Then the final step is I would come over here and I would simply delete the text-based equivalent, the big hog, okay? I would then create another coded value attribute domain for my surveyors, surface, usage, do the exact same process, create the field, calc the values across from the text version to the coded value attribute short integer version, and then delete the hogs, right? Delete the text type. Now, what really is it going to do for me? Let me take a look, show you what happens here. Here is what I did is I dumped out the data to a DBF file, and this is the original file that we were dealing with prior to any changes. So there's Yellowstone National Park Trails. It was a DBF. Now notice it's 830 kilobytes. It's only 1,600 records. Then what I did is I made the change, got rid of all of those big text fields, and now it's 259 kilobytes. All the records are there, but I dropped this thing 1/3 the size. Now imagine that we don't have 1,600 records. Let's say we have 1,000,000 records. Let's say that this original size is 1 gigabyte, and I can dump it to 1/3 of a gigabyte. How much faster is that data going to move across the internet to your end users relative to the big size that it was, even a little while ago? So that is a huge benefit that you can recognize and realize by using coded value attribute domains, doing these things in a very smart way, and you're going to end up being able to develop a much better performing geodatabase, web maps, and so on. So I'm going to open the floor now to any questions. If you have a question, you can either put it into the chat box, or you could unmute yourself and ask.